Dolphins and Rams will play on Monday Night Football, and we are getting you prepped with a crossover Thursday here with Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and what is up, Dolphins fans? Welcome to another episode, a crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Dolphins. We're going to preview the Rams-Dolphins Monday Night Football Week 10 matchup. Now, if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the Locked On Dolphins and Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Subscribe to the podcast. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. And today, of course, we're joined by Kyle Krabs. You can follow him at Grinding the Tape, the host of Locked On Dolphins. And on today's episode, we're breaking down this Week 10 matchup, the big storylines, the matchups, maybe throw out some predictions. I don't know if Kyle's ready for a prediction. I might throw out one, but we'll get into all that. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Kyle, so some similarities between these two teams. I mean, you got the early losses for the Rams. I mean, 3 of those 4 losses were by a touchdown or less. You look at this Dolphins team kind of struggling to close out games during some of these losses. You lose 3 straight by a combined 10 points. I mean, what is going on with this Dolphins team late in games?
Yeah, I think it's been a tale of with and without Tua Tagovailoa. The defense played admirably early against the Colts and had a Raheem Mostert fumble in plus territory. That was a scoring drive that started on the wrong side of the 50 that really turned that game against Indianapolis, which was the last game without Tua and his return from concussion protocol. You're up 10 points in that game, and the offense just can't really stick anything consistently going. Tua comes back. He scored 27 points in each of the last 2 games. And he got hurt. They're getting their butts kicked up front, to be honest with you. And some of that stems from Jaylen Phillips re-injuring, having a new injury to the same leg that he had the Achilles tear last year on Thanksgiving or Black Friday. He takes friendly fire and partially tears his ACL. He's out for the year. And the Dolphins have sorely missed him as far as their ability to win just with 4 up front on the edge. And then Zach Sealer has an incident in practice and breaks his orbital bone. Dude missed no games in like his first 4 career seasons with the Dolphins. Breaks his orbital bone in practice, has missed the last 2 games. And the guys that they have in that spot opposite of Calais Campbell at defensive tackle has been Deshaun Hand, who's done well to keep his head above water. But rotationally, you're getting 15 to 12 snaps a game for the likes of Neil Farrell and Brandon Peely. And these guys are just not NFL players. Like they cannot hold the point of attack. They're on the ground whenever they're taking double teams, and they're 320-plus pound guys. So I'm sure Rams fans will perk up and get interested in that because, you know, what McVay likes to do with his offensive scheme and how they like to run the ball. And I know they got potentially some guys coming back or at least opening practice windows that we're talking about when we talk about the Rams. It's been a problem. And now you're down Javon Holland, who broke his hand and missed the game against the Colts. And then he was back against the Cardinals. And not to say that it's all injuries because the linebacker play has been terrible for them. They benched David Long, who was one of their best players last year on the defense from a run perspective. He's been awful fitting gaps. He's playing hurt, but he's playing and he's getting picked on in coverage. And now there's no appeal in the run game either. So they've kind of been a mess defensively. So the defense plays with a lot of pride and keeps you in games without Tua, and Tua comes back and now you score points and the defense is banged up front and just can't keep anything held together.
Yeah, I think on the Rams side, one of the big storylines in their turnaround where they've won 3 straight games since the bye is you've seen Chris Shula's defense. By the way, Shula, great name in Dolphins world. We know that. They've turned around a big way, and you've seen big takeaways. Now they've scored in 3 games. 3 games they've scored on the defensive side of the football. You're seeing pressure. You're seeing Jared Verse, who was getting pressure early on, but now he's getting home with more consistently. Him and Braden Fisk, the top 2 rookies when it comes to pressure. A lot of people were saying that Braden Fisk was an overpay. He turns out to be this big pickup in the draft, and those 2 have really, really done a great job in doing the impossible thing, and that's filling the shoes of Aaron Donald and helping get pressure up front and on the edges. And then you look at the fact that the Rams are fourth in points allowed per drive since the week 6 bye. So Chris Shula really has done a great job kind of masking some of these deficiencies on the Rams defensive side. They kind of struggle with the boundary corners. I mean, you got Akella Witherspoon, who they brought back into the fold. He has struggled a little bit against the Seahawks. And then on the other side of you got Darius Williams, who has done the best of the corners so far, but still that's kind of an area of weakness that the Rams do have. And then they've struggled with some linebacker play as well. But at the end of the day, they're getting the job done. They're allowing Matthew Stafford in this Rams offense and Kyron Williams to be able to score enough points to win these games. So really that's been the biggest key. I mean, you got talent on offense. You have Sean McVay, and you knew you were going to score points at some point, but without this defensive turnaround, the Rams wouldn't be on this 3-game winning streak and firmly in the mix in the NFC West.
Yeah, I think that's where Miami is going to look back at a couple of these games down the stretch and wish that their awakening on that side of the ball maybe could have snapped into place a little bit sooner, because they have shown flashes, especially against Buffalo offensively, of being the team that you thought that they were capable of. They were a little herky-jerky at the start of the season with Jacksonville and a week 1 game plan, and you could tell they played it close to the vest. And then Tua goes down in week 2. So when Tua came back against Arizona, you said, man, we really don't know what they are offensively, because the sample size was a game and a half at the beginning of the season, and now it's week 8. So I think that's a storyline. I think Miami, based on the tone and messaging of what they've been talking about internally, they believe they're close to getting over the hump. And whether it's too little too late or too little too late is to be determined, because obviously you've got a primetime game. You have not played particularly well under Mike McDaniel in primetime. It's a road game going to the West Coast on Monday Night Football. But then they look at what they have after that, and it's the Raiders and the Patriots at home. So I think they feel like they're close. And the challenge for them is to kind of get the Rams defense with all those young players. If they can put the window dressings on and create the confusion, can you get some regression from what that team looked like defensively early on in the season?
Yeah, and of course, if it's Monday Night Football and you look up and you have to guess which team is playing, it's a pretty good chance it is the Miami Dolphins. Of course, well known, the Dolphins have played on Monday night more than any teams would be the 89th in the team's history. They're 43-45 on Monday Night Football. Also a really good record against the Rams all the way back until 2004. The Rams are 2-12 against the Dolphins. So that's a little bit of concern. You got that Monday Night Magic. You've got the favorable matchup against the Rams since 2004. And look, we're going to find out if this Rams team is going to continue to stack these wins against winnable opponents, because really had a gauntlet early on this season. You start to get healthy. You get Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back. You start to gel on defense. And really the truth of the matter is even though you're sitting at 500, you have to win these games when you look at the back half of the schedule if you want to be serious playoff contenders.
Yeah, and Miami was kind of the opposite of that, where it was expected to be that way in the beginning of the season. When you looked at, okay, San Francisco, the Jets, the Cleveland Browns, and you had to do that on the road, and it's a cold weather opponent for Miami at Houston. And some of those teams have their own individual pathways that they've been on, right? But the record and the strength of schedule for Miami, this was supposed to be the light part of the schedule up until the game last week. You looked at the first 7 weeks and said, hey, there's a lot of winnable football games here. And I think that's what has a lot of Dolphins fans sour, is they were winnable football games, some of them winnable football games without your starting quarterback when you looked incoherent offensively and you didn't win the games. But those Dolphins fans who are clinging to hope look at that schedule and say, the Browns aren't what we thought they were. The Jets aren't what they thought they were. The Raiders are bad. The Patriots are bad. There's opportunities where you can get some of these games at home if you can steal a couple of games against teams that have better records than you, that are maybe playing hotter than what you've been. And it's just, can you get the tipping game before it's too late?
And that's why I find this as such a dangerous game for the Rams, because Tua, much better last week, extremely efficient. You almost beat that Bills team. The Rams, Monday Night Football is always electric at SoFi Stadium. And you know that Mike McDaniel's not ready to say that their playoff hopes are done. So it's going to be a big game on Monday night at SoFi Stadium. But coming up next, we're going to take a look at some of these key matchups to ultimately decide the winner. That's coming up next on this crossover episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Dolphins.
Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by ZBiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. It's this byproduct and not dehydration that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to take ZBiotics your first drink of the night to drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. Drink pre-alcohol for best results. Take pre-alcohol with your first drink of the night. 2, drink responsibly. And 3, enjoy tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code LockedOnNFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed by 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. If you are looking for something to do, get your tickets through all of your local concerts, comedy, theater, sporting events, you name it, through Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Really appreciate the fact that Game Time offers you panoramic sight lines of your tickets before you hit commit and put them into your cart. You can toggle in all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees when you put the tickets into your cart. And with just a few taps on your phone, you can get the tickets delivered directly to your phone. The first edition of the tournament, Choque de Gigantes, will take place at Lone Depot Park from 11/8 to 11/10, featuring the top league teams from Venezuela, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. Game Time is offering 10% off on Choque de Gigantes tickets. The duration of the deal runs now until the end of the day tomorrow on 11/18. So get your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can get the panoramic views. You can get the all-in pricing up front, and you can get the tickets to Choque de Gigantes delivered directly to your phone. What time is it? It's Game Time. Right now, you can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams and Locked On Dolphins. And just also want to give a shout out to those every listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode. We cannot thank you enough. You can join that every listeners club too. Just watch and listen to an episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Dolphins, and you won't miss a thing about your favorite team. All right, Kyle, picking up in the second segment here, I want to talk a little bit about Mike McDaniel, Tua Tagovailoa. Since last season, McDaniel 4-9 with or without Tua Tagovailoa. Is there a situation where maybe teams are figuring out his offense, or what do you make of that?
I think a lot of what the Dolphins, it appeared as though they were trying to do schematically this offseason to add new layers. It felt like a lot of it got thrown in the trash coming out of the bye when they were running a lot of escort swings where they've got a fullback or a tight end who's swinging out into the flat, and then the back or another skill player is flaring with him to kind of get a blocker set up, and you're releasing 2 eligibles really to run one route. And what that did for coverage spacing for teams that wanted to play press and play up in the face of Jaylen, Waddle, and Tyreek Hill, and then cloud over the top of it, was it really limited your spacing as far as like what you could do with the rest of your eligibles. So I think it felt like to me what they invested as what they thought was going to be a core principle and an answer for them for checkdowns and getting explosive plays, like with easy passes in the flat. They came out of the bye week against the Colts and they ran it like twice. And that is, I think, a bigger thing for what the offenses look like aside of just Tua and his coherency operating the offense. Now, there have been teams that have provided challenges, and teams have been less and less afraid of playing physical with Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And that is where some of their personnel moves of Jonnu Smith. And Jonnu Smith really didn't get involved for the first month of the season. And then he started to pick it up, and now he's been back with Tua, and there's been maintained production there. So it was the end of last season was about finding, if it's not number 10 and if it's not number 17, who are our answers in the passing game? And then they made some personnel investments, but the way that I think they thought they were going to use them, it didn't really materialize. And then Tua was out, and then they've come back, and they've been really good offensively the last 2 weeks. So I don't know that it's necessarily the book is out on Mike, but you had like this really awkward intersection of teams had answers for the way you were playing offensively last year. And then I think they misallocated schematically some things at the beginning of the season, and then your quarterback went down.
Yeah, because it looks like to me, I mean, just watching last week's game, I mean, it looks like the Dolphins are the Dolphins once again, especially on offense. You had an efficient Tua 25 for 28. I mean, 89%, 231, 2 TDs, no picks. He was sacked just one time. Devon A-Chain, he's been great all season long. I mean, I think that you look at, too, the balance, too. I mean, 31 carries, 28 pass attempts, 7 receivers caught a pass. I mean, it looks like you could easily make the case this team's healthy. You don't lose Tua, you're right in the mix. So you shouldn't feel as though, okay, there's something wrong with McDaniel or anything like that. I mean, I think kind of looking back at the Gase era, I mean, he was someone that focused way too much on the offensive side, and you didn't look as much on defense. And you kind of mentioned at the top of the show, just not getting pressure from the front four. Do you think this is something that can be figured out on the defensive side? I mean, was going to talk about our rookies, Chop Robinson versus Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, and kind of the pressure elements of that. But is it as simple as, okay, the offense is going to score points? We know that Waddle and Tyreek Hill are a little bit of slump right now, but it's not really that big of a concern. It's about, can you get this defense to match the offense?
I think that's the bigger thing right now. Now, Mike McDaniel's not without his warts as a head coach, and there's been issues with getting plays in a timely manner and burning timeouts and challenge management and all that kind of stuff. But at its core, the thing that he was supposed to provide, what had a lot of Dolphins fans concerned with that stretch of games that you just mentioned, wasn't being provided. Well, it looks like they've problem solved some of that. I'm not going to say Tua's going to go 25 of 28 every week and have 2 throwaways and a contested catch, but I don't think you're going to see Tyreek Hill going for 1,700 yards in a season or be back on that pace. It is more about the balance. And that seems to have sorted itself out. Yes, defensively, I don't think they have enough horses up front in general. They're going to have to be really reliant on Zach Sealer to be an 80% snap taker when he's back in. They've been calculated despite being down a lot of guys with Calais Campbell, and that's where they're yielding explosive plays on defense is when Calais Campbell and Zach Sealer are on the field. Chop's been getting some good run. He's been very up or down. It's just a matter of, like, does he have a coherent pass rush plan? Does he not? And if he doesn't, and he hasn't really shown a lot of variety in the ways in which he wins, what kind of tackle are you going against? Are you going against a guy that he can stress upfield with his first step quickness? If he can, he's going to get some pressures and be around the quarterback. If he can, he's probably going to end up taking less snaps than you'd expect in a game. So they're banking on Bradley Chubb coming back and being healthy for them. He's about 11 months removed from an ACL plus knee injury that was suffered at week 17 last year. It sounds like they're maybe getting close with Bradley Chubb, but I think the fact that they didn't make any moves, I know they were interested in adding an edge rusher at the deadline, and they didn't really like the price, the asking point that was out there for them. So they end up staying pat, and a lot of that feels like it's for Bradley Chubb. So they're banking on being healthy and that providing them the answers, but they've obviously dug themselves this hole that they're living in right now.
Yeah, and you look at that Dolphins team standing pat because you have reinforcements on the way. A lot of us Rams fans were looking at, okay, do you add the linebacker spot or do you possibly add at the cornerback spot? Really not a lot of cap space to work with, a little over $2 million. You can restructure, but still, there really wasn't a move on the table that made a ton of sense for the Rams. But that definitely is the glaring weakness of this team, and a part that I think that the Dolphins are going to look to exploit. I mean, you got Tyreek Hill, Waddle, you got weapons, and really the boundary corner depth has been an issue for the Rams all season long. Now, since he's been back, Darius Williams, like I said, he's been the most trusted cornerback. He still gave up, though, 4 catches on 6 targets, a long touchdown pass. Witherspoon, they were going to bring him back, then they weren't. Then they ultimately did bring him back, Ahkello Witherspoon. He has been significantly better than Trey White, who they just traded to the Ravens because he didn't work out on a 1-year deal. But even he gave up 3 catches on 4 targets, another deep explosive, and it was bad. It was on the 2nd and 24 in the final drive. You saw Jackson Smith and Jigba just rip apart this Rams secondary. So that's definitely something that concerns me. And are you looking for that big Tyreek Hill breakout game? I mean, a little bit of a slump lately. What have you seen from him of late?
He's played his aside of the Jacksonville game week 1, in which he had the 80-yard touchdown that kind of flipped that game back around and got them back in it, where they came back and won in the 4th quarter. He's played his best 2 games of the season. He's definitely playing with a better energy with Tua on the field. I think that's been something that's stood out. Mike McDaniel talked about both him and Jaylen Waddle. Their involvement rises when they are more involved not touching the football because of the stress that this offense requires from its wide receivers to be involved in the running game and to actively block and be effective blockers. And that energy level was kind of waxing and waning in the games in the hollow points without Tua, but the energy's been back up. But I think the big matchup for Miami in this game for where I think they'll exploit, as you mentioned, the boundary corners and being able to maybe take some shots. I think they'll really try to test these linebackers with Troy Reeder and Christian Roseboom, guys that, they're smart players, but they're relatively inexperienced players, and they're not great athletes relative to some of the speed that Miami can test you with horizontally. So how do they try to manipulate those guys, I think, will be the key to the Rams' success in slowing down Miami offensively in this game.
Yeah, I mean, since Omar Spates has been there, he's provided a little boost against the run, but that's certainly an area where all teams have been looking to take advantage of the Rams, and that definitely is kind of the soft spot that you can take advantage of, manipulate, and it really is going to come down to, does this Rams score points? Does this Rams team light it up on the scoreboard to complement the defense? Because I think, look, it's a dome, Monday Night Football, it's indoors. It's definitely could be a high-scoring game in this one, and I think another area I'm looking at, too, is the pressure. I mean, you look at this Dolphins team and their ability to limit pressure this season. They've done it at an extremely high level, and the Rams are right at the top. So you look at the Dolphins' 16.7 pressure rate on dropbacks, the lowest in the NFL, and you look at where the Rams have been living lately. That's been the strong suit of this defense, is getting to the quarterback, getting home. You got Jared Verse, Kobie Turner, Braden Fisk, Byron Young. Those are all names to look out for when it comes to trying to get to Tua Tagovailoa. And the Rams' highest pressure rate in the NFL, 42.8%, also 8th in sack rate. So can you get home on Tua? On the flip side, the Rams, no sacks allowed on Matthew Stafford for 2 consecutive weeks. They've kept him vertical. You mentioned the Dolphins struggling to get pressure at their front four. Maybe you switch things up to try to get some pressure, try to get to Stafford, because if he has all day to try to carve up, we know what that usually leads to in his history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a very, I think he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think
arm talent still certainly, no question about it.
He can hit every throw from every angle in every kind of pocket. And it's been a tough stretch for Miami because Kyler Murray put the Superman cape on in the second half. Well, Miami played well to keep Arizona off the field in the first half, and they played time of possession to shorten that game. And Josh Allen was very disciplined throughout the course of the game, and his interception that he threw was on a sight hot on a slant off a run play where he decided to just pull it out and it kind of glanced off Keon Coleman's hands, and Jaylen Ramsey makes a miraculous play to make the interception. So that's where I think Miami's going to have to choose where we're going to live, where we're going to die. Are we going to try to play matchups and play with numbers in coverage? Are we going to try to bring 5 and force him to hurry up his process? And they're going to have to keep changing the picture because they've started out relatively well defensively the last 2 weeks. And as the game's worn on, opposing coaches have had answers and caught up to where Miami's trying to go.
Yeah, and if you watch the Seahawks game, I mean, they blitzed 29.5% of his dropbacks, and it definitely was a factor. It definitely was a factor for this Rams offensive line that is trying to get healthy, trying to establish that cohesion that we were hoping to get at the beginning of this season. But yeah, I mean, they were making him uncomfortable, and a lot of those throws for Matthew Stafford were in tight windows. But truth of the matter is Matthew Stafford is certainly a guy that's going to step up when you need him. He's going to make throws in big spots. But we're going to talk about Stafford. We're talking a couple more players and how this game might play out on Monday. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams and Locked On Dolphins.
Dolphins, Rams, Monday Night Football. If you're interested in tackling some of the action, you can do so with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, read live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Right now, Dolphins, this line continues to move the Dolphins' way. We will see. The Rams have activated a couple of interior offensive linemen off of injured reserve, both Steve Avila and Jonah Jackson. Are they rusty? Does that help? Does the betting think that helps? What's the money flow? use your gut. Dolphins sitting right now at +1.5 on the spread against the Rams for Monday Night Football. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you are looking for more ways to stay involved with all the games, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2-player stat projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks also gives you insurance policy for your picks. If one of your players goes down in the first half of one of your games and does not return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. And best of all, you are playing against the house. It is not you against 10 million other active members. It is you versus the numbers over on Prize Picks. You can sign up today, get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's download the app, use code LOCKEDONNFL, get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams and Locked On Dolphins. So, Kyle, here in our third segment, optimistic. It's still early. I mean, we have to sit through a whole weekend of games just to get to this game, which I actually really kind of enjoy, kind of the no-stress Sunday of watching the teams around the league. But what are the feels like right now? You optimistic heading into this one?
I think there's some nice building blocks offensively for how Mike McDaniel called that game. Usually when Miami plays Buffalo, they play with this urgency to try to score points and feel like they have to trade possessions. And usually the way that goes against Buffalo is you do it for a couple possessions and then you make a mistake and then Buffalo capitalizes on it. And now you're down 2 scores and you press even more and you try to catch up. And now you go for it on 4th down on 4th and 4 on your own 46 and you don't get it. And then they get a short field and then they get more points. And it's like, that's how you lose that game 48-20, which is how they lost it in Buffalo last year. They stuck with the script. And I know the game script allowed them to not feel that pressure of like, oh, we're going to fall behind by a possession here. But it was the first time that I thought there was the balance that you alluded to earlier from like a run pass perspective. 31 rushes, but it was 30 designed runs. One of the carries was a scramble on a 4th down from Tua. Do that the rest of the season because whether you're going to win the games or not, Dolphins fans want to know who's accountable for a season that was supposed to be a competitive year. You're 2-6 at the midway point. That's not what anybody expected. You spent a lot of money. You had high expectations. This was supposed to be part of the culmination of what your rebuild was. And it obviously didn't happen. Some of that's you didn't have a good backup quarterback plan. Some of that's other injuries. Some of that's your own self-inflicted wounds and errors. So more than winning or losing the game for me, like the thing that I take interest in is like, I want to know each week who is accountable for what happens for better or for worse, because you're kind of evaluating everything right now with this Dolphins team, asking yourselves, who's a part of the solution? Who's a part of the problem? Who doesn't need to be here next year? Who do we want to make the centerpieces of what it looks like moving forward? And to have that, it was probably the best resume game Mike McDaniel had as far as like a play caller and sticking to the script and being disciplined and not trying to throw for 400 yards because he's got 2 toys at wide receiver that he likes to get the football to. So I'm excited for that more so than I am, oh, here comes the playoff run. Like I'm not even mentally prepared to wrap my head around that. And my listeners on Locked On Dolphins are very quick to push back and say, pump the brakes. We got to figure out what we are as a football team. So it's another data point in that set. And for that, I'm definitely excited.
Yeah, I think Rams fans are kind of similar too. It's kind of a 1-game schedule type mentality where, let's not get ahead of ourselves in the division, in the playoff race, lots of football to be played. I think you look at this being a really compelling matchup for both teams because of where they're at, and both have really, the Rams have definitely found their groove. The Dolphins look like they could be on the brink of finding their groove. And yeah, the thing that kind of makes me a little fearful is Tua starting to really get that efficiency back. He's settling back in after the injury. Waddle, Reek, you got Devon A-Chain, who's been really fantastic, the best player on offense all season. I mean, 420 yards on 93 attempts, and the receptions too, the balance that he brings to 37 catches. So yeah, that's definitely going to be a weapon. And you look at this Rams defense, look, they have been a lot better. There's no doubt about it, but they're still 23rd against the pass this season. McDaniel with a couple extra days to prepare, really looking at ways to exploit that. It's a great head coaching matchup too. Also look, McDaniel 8-15 on the road throughout his career. Dolphins going all the way to the West Coast, going up against an elite quarterback, an elite head coach. Feels like the Rams, though, kind of the momentum that they've built. I think we're going to see a high-scoring game. I think we're going to see some big plays. It's going to be one of the more entertaining Monday Night Football games all year. But the Rams have just kind of sort of find this magic where they just find ways to win football games, whether it's getting a turnover late, getting a role player to step up, make a big play. I mean, Demarcus Robinson is the guy who scored 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games. He's the guy that catches the 39-yard walk-off touchdown. So this team realizes that their margin for error is extremely thin, and you have to win these big games at home. And I just think the Rams, not ready for a score prediction yet. And of course, yeah, Rams guy picks Rams to win. Wow, big whoop headline there. But it does feel like the Rams kind of squeaked this one out. But man, this Dolphins team, they always scare me, man. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think it's who's going to make the mistake. And that's I think there's going to be one. I'd expect points. I'd expect the over to hit in this game. But I think this is going to be one bounce of the ball or the other. I like to kind of dangle that prediction for Monday or the show before the game to make sure I have that carrot to dangle and get everybody back. So I'm going to sit on my score prediction, but I'm in the same boat you are. I think this is going to be a very entertaining and closely contested football game.
How about the Dolphins fans? I mean, are we expecting a big crowd at SoFi?
I would say there's always, like, no matter where you travel, and I've traveled for Combine and Senior Bowl, and I've traveled for games. I did a game at SoFi, the Bills opener a couple of years ago. You always seem to see just like 1 or 2 people wearing like a Dolphins hat or something like that. It feels like there's just a decent amount of us everywhere. I know there is the SoCal Dolphins fan club is out there, and they're a very strong group. So I think there'll be a decent representation. I don't think it's going to be taking over the house or anything like that. But when they played the Chargers last year in the season opener, they definitely had a strong show out there for that game. So I'd expect to see a decent turnout of Aqua.
Let me ask you this, because I think Dolphins easily top 5 uniform in NFL history. Do you have a favorite Dolphins uniform? Because I still like the mid-90s Dan Marino with the drop shadow. There. So that's the OG one, right? Kind of 80s.
So that
I like
is
the 90s super drop shadow one. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. I think I'll take pretty much any of the combinations that they have other than the one that they have now would be the ones that I'd probably pick. So
you don't like the ones they have now?
No, they're clean, but I
like the throwback with all the stripes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could take I'll take all the throwback ones that they have over the modern era. And I know that was like one of the owner, Stephen Ross's like pet projects. So it's like he's all about them because he was one who brought them in. But I think there's such great heritage and the aesthetics of the old school ones, just like Seattle with their throwbacks and
just all Rams fans. We want our throwbacks back too. I mean,
man,
kind of a mixed feeling, but they got to sell these jerseys somehow, you know. But
right.
Well, we got a big one on Monday Night Football. It's exciting. Week 10, Rams, Dolphins, SoFi Stadium, Monday Night Football. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Dolphins. For myself and Kyle Krabs, you can follow me at DMAC_LA. You can follow Kyle Krabs over on the X at Grind the Tape. As always, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house and Locked On Dolphins.